Am I the asshole for telling my siblings I don't think it's fair to split the bill equally since they have kids and I don't? I'm the youngest of three with two older sisters in their 30s while I'm still in my 20s. Though we're close, money is a constant source of friction, especially since my sisters both have families with two kids each, and I'm single and child-free. Typically, this doesn't create problems except when it's time to split the bill, and that's when the real tension begins. For Mother's Day this year, my sisters suggested we take our mom out for lunch, which sounded perfect, an opportunity to celebrate together. But right away, they brought up splitting the bill 3 ways evenly. This wasn't the first time I'd encountered this setup, and it wasn't the first time I felt uneasy about it. Every family event, dinners, holidays, vacations, you name it, we always divide the cost equally. But my sisters bring their spouses and kids along, while it's just me on my side of the table. I've stayed quiet about it for a long time, but this time, I just couldn't. It doesn't feel fair to cover a third of a bill when I'm only paying for myself and my mom, while they're paying for their families. So I decided to be honest. I told them that I didn't feel it was fair to split the bill equally, since their kids would also be eating. And these aren't small kids who barely touch their food. One of them is nearly 18, with an adult-sized appetite. These kids are ordering main courses, drinks, desserts, the works. I suggested that we split the bill in a way that reflects who is actually eating. The room fell silent, and then the defensiveness kicked in. My sisters got upset, saying I was making a fuss over a simple family meal and that we shouldn't be so fixated on who ordered what. To me, it wasn't about nitpicking. It was about fairness. I'm not trying to dodge my responsibility. I just think it's wrong for me to pay extra because they're bringing their families. Then my mom found out, which didn't help. Somehow she always does, and she took their side, saying I was blowing things out of proportion and that I should let it go for the sake of family harmony. But the truth is, I've been letting this go for years, and it's wearing me down. I'm tired of feeling like I'm being taken advantage of just because I don't have kids. This isn't the first time I've dealt with this. A couple of years back, we went on a family trip. My mom, one sister, and I agreed to split the costs 3 ways. I assumed that meant dividing up accommodations and shared activities. But once we were there, I realized my sister included her husband and kids in this arrangement. So I was covering a third of the cost for a trip that involved her whole family. My mom saw it too, but urged me to keep quiet to avoid causing tension. So I paid my share and moved on, but the resentment lingered, and now it's all resurfaced with this Mother's Day plan. After staying silent for so long, I feel like I can't anymore. For me, this is no longer just about money, it's about fairness. I feel like my sisters are expecting me to cover part of their costs when I didn't choose to have kids. I'm more than willing to pay my share. I just don't think it's fair for me to chip in for theirs as well. So, after the whole Mother's Day incident, things were definitely tense between my sisters and me. It was like this unspoken tension hung in the air, and I wasn't quite sure how to handle it. My mom stuck to her usual peacekeeper role, while my sisters seemed to be quietly fuming. But I held my ground. I wasn't going to let this issue go unnoticed this time. A few weeks passed, and things seemed to settle a bit. We weren't as chatty in the family group text, but we kept things polite. Then, unexpectedly, one of my sisters suggested we all get together again. This time, it was for a weekend dinner at a pretty upscale restaurant in town, the kind of place where even the appetizers can set you back a bit. Naturally, our mom was invited, and of course, my sisters were bringing their families along. I had a feeling I knew where this was going, but I tried not to assume the worst. Maybe this time they'd be more understanding about splitting the bill after how things went last time. The day of the dinner arrived, and we all met up at the restaurant. It was one of those cozy, dimly lit spots with a warm ambiance, the kind that feels inviting but also lets you know the meal's going to be pricey. My sisters showed up with their husbands and kids, and I could tell the kids were excited. They were talking about all the different things they wanted to order: steak, pasta, dessert, you name it. We were seated at a big table in the back, and as the waiter handed out menus, I looked around trying to read the room. My sisters were chatting with their husbands. The kids were debating which dessert they'd get, and my mom was sitting at the head of the table, her usual calm self. I couldn't help but notice there was no mention of how we'd split the bill. I felt that familiar sinking feeling in my stomach, but decided to wait and see if they'd address it later. The evening moved along smoothly enough. We ordered appetizers, main courses, and drinks. The kids were in high spirits and conversation flowed easily. I chose something modest, nothing extravagant, because I suspected how this might turn out. Meanwhile, my sisters and their families weren't holding back. They ordered steaks, cocktails, extra sides, and, of course, the kids got whatever they wanted. By the time dessert came, I was mentally bracing for what was next. When the waiter finally brought the check, he placed it in the center of the table, almost like he was setting a stage. My heart started racing as I waited for someone to speak up. My older sister reached for the check, took a quick look, then passed it to my other sister. Finally, they looked at each other, then turned to me, and I knew they were about to suggest splitting it 3 ways again. "So, I guess we'll just split it 3 ways?" my older sister said, almost like it was the most casual thing, as if we hadn't just had this exact issue weeks before. I looked at them, and I could feel my frustration building up. I knew saying something could lead to another argument, but I also couldn't let it go this time. I'd made my point clear before, and I wasn't about to back down. So I did what I thought was the only fair move. I asked to see the bill. My sisters exchanged a quick glance, but handed it over. I went over the itemized list, keeping track of what I'd ordered and what my mom had eaten. I took out my phone to do some quick calculations, making sure I covered everything I was responsible for. "Actually," I said, keeping my tone as calm as I could, "I'm just going to pay for my meal and Mom's. You guys can split the rest however you want." The table fell silent. My sisters stared at me, clearly taken aback. I noticed their husbands exchanging a look, probably unsure of whether to say something. The kids, still oblivious to the tension, kept talking about dessert. My mom, bless her, just sighed and looked down at her hands, clearly not wanting to get involved. "You're serious?" my other sister finally asked, her tone full of disbelief. "Yes," I replied, steadying my voice. "I think that's fair." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. It was clear they hadn't expected this response, and now they were faced with splitting the actual cost of their own meals and their kids' meals. After what felt like forever, they finally nodded, though it was obvious they weren't thrilled. "Fine," my older sister replied, a hint of irritation in her voice. "If that's what you want." I didn't add anything further. I counted out the cash for my portion, left it on the table, and excused myself to use the restroom. When I returned, the tension was still hanging thick in the air, but the check had been paid. We left the restaurant not long after, with hardly a word between us. The drive home was silent, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I'd just made things even more strained. The next day, I got a call from one of my sisters. I had a feeling this was coming, but I wasn't exactly eager to have this conversation. When I picked up, she got straight to the point. "You really embarrassed us last night," she said, her voice carrying a mix of irritation and disappointment. "I don't see why you had to make such a big deal out of it. We weren't asking you to pay for our kids, just to split the bill equally, like we always do." I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "It's not about making a big deal," I replied. "It's about being fair. I'm covering myself and Mom. I don't feel right paying for part of your kids' meals when I didn't decide to have kids." "We're family," she fired back. "Families pitch in for each other. It's not about who ordered what or who has kids. It's about being together and sharing the costs." "I get that," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But it doesn't feel like sharing when I'm paying for more than what I ordered. I'm not saying I don't want to contribute or be part of the family. I just think we should each pay for what we actually had." She paused, and I could tell she was trying to find the right words. After a moment, she sighed. "Look, I understand your point, but you have to see how awkward it gets when you do things like that. We're used to splitting things equally, and when you break it down like that, it feels petty." I wasn't sure how to respond. To me, this wasn't about pettiness. It was about standing up for what seemed fair. But clearly, she saw things differently. "I'm not trying to make things uncomfortable," I said finally. "I just want to make sure we're all being fair to each other." She didn't have much to add after that. We ended the conversation, but it was obvious she was still unhappy. I was left with this nagging feeling, wondering if I'd made a mistake, even though I genuinely believed I'd done the right thing. After my conversation with my sister, I was left stewing for days. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. The expectation that I should just quietly go along with whatever they wanted, even if it wasn't fair. I kept hearing her words echo in my head. We're family. Family helps each other out. But wasn't fairness a part of that too? Shouldn't it be a two-way street? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being cornered, that my sisters were leaning on the family angle to get what they wanted without considering my point of view. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. If they wanted to insist on the whole family splits things evenly rule, maybe it was time to see how they'd like it if the tables were turned. The idea hit me out of nowhere, and once it did, I couldn't let it go. I was going to show them what it felt like when someone else brought a few extra guests to the table, and we'd see how they liked splitting the bill then. A couple of weeks later, my older sister texted me, asking if we were all free for another family dinner. This time, it was for our mom's birthday, and she suggested a fancy new Italian restaurant that had just opened downtown. It was the type of place where reservations are booked weeks in advance, and the wine list is longer than the menu. Perfect, I thought. This was the perfect setting for my plan. I contacted a few of my closest friends, the kind who wouldn't turn down a free meal, especially at a place like this. I explained my situation to them, and they were all too eager to help me out. I told them to order whatever they liked and not to hold back. This was my little experiment in fairness. The night of the dinner arrived, and I showed up at the restaurant with my entourage in tow. I could see the shock on my sisters' faces when they realized I hadn't come alone. There were 5 of us in total, myself and 4 friends, compared to their usual party of 6. My mom, as always, tried to keep things light, but I could tell she was curious about what was happening. "Hey everyone," I greeted them with a big smile, acting like this was all perfectly normal. "I hope you don't mind, but I invited a few friends to join us tonight. I thought it'd be fun to have a bigger group for Mom's birthday. The more, the merrier, right?" My sisters exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond. Their husbands looked just as puzzled, and the kids were more interested in the menu than in the new people at the table. My sisters tried to stay polite, but I could tell this wasn't the kind of family dinner they'd expected. Sure, my older sister finally said, forcing a smile. The more, the merrier. We all took our seats, and my friends fit right in, chatting with everyone as if they'd known them for years. The waiter came over, handed out menus, and took our drink orders. My friends didn't hold back. They started ordering the most expensive cocktails on the menu. I could see my sisters' eyes widen as they realized what was happening. I kept the conversation going, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, talking about work, life, and everything in between. But I could sense my sisters growing more and more uncomfortable as my friends continued to order. Appetizers, main courses, sides, desserts. They didn't hold back, and neither did I. I ordered exactly what I wanted, enjoying the look on my sisters' faces as the orders kept coming. By the time we got to dessert, I could tell my sisters were feeling the pressure. They knew the bill was going to be huge, and I noticed them whispering to each other, probably wondering what they'd do. But I kept up the act, playing it cool as if I hadn't noticed a thing. Finally, the waiter brought the check and set it in the center of the table. My older sister hesitated, but eventually reached for it, as she usually did. I watched as her eyes widened slightly at the total, then passed it to my other sister, who had a similar reaction. They both looked at me, and I could see the unspoken question in their eyes. What now? "So I guess we'll just split it 3 ways, right?" I said, echoing their words from our last dinner. I kept my tone casual, almost offhand, but inside I was enjoying every second of this. The silence was intense. My sisters looked at each other and then back at me, and I could tell they were calculating. They were cornered. If they agreed to split the bill evenly, they'd end up covering a significant portion of the meal that my friends, who they hadn't invited, had ordered. But if they didn't, they'd have to admit that maybe, just maybe, their approach to splitting the bill in the past hadn't been fair. My older sister spoke first. This is a big bill and your friends ordered a lot. Maybe it would make more sense to split it differently this time." "Oh, come on," I replied, keeping my voice light. "We always split things 3 ways. We're a family, right? Family helps each other out." I watched as they processed the reality of the situation. This was exactly the point I'd been trying to make all along, but now they were the ones facing the bill for more than their fair share, and they weren't thrilled. My other sister cleared her throat, trying to sound diplomatic. "Maybe we should just split it based on what each person ordered. That might be more fair given the situation." I leaned back, acting like I was considering it. I guess we could do that. But that's not really how we usually do things. Are you sure? I could see their frustration, but they had no choice. They knew that any argument would come across as hypocritical, so they reluctantly agreed. Yeah, I think that's the fairest way to handle it, my older sister said, a hint of resignation in her voice. We'll split it based on what everyone ordered. All right, I said, pretending to be flexible. If that's what you want. We spent the next few minutes going over the bill, dividing it up by what each person had ordered. My friends, who had been quietly observing, chipped in without complaint. When it was all settled, my share was far smaller than it would have been if we'd split evenly, while my sisters ended up paying more than they had expected. But it was all fair, just what they had requested. As we left the restaurant, I could tell my sisters were still processing what had happened. They tried to keep things friendly, but I could sense their annoyance. My mom, who had stayed silent throughout, gave me a knowing look as if to say, I see what you did there. She gave me a small, approving smile. The ride home was quiet, but I felt a sense of satisfaction. I'd made my point, and I was pretty sure my sisters wouldn't forget it anytime soon. I wasn't sure if it would change anything long-term, but at least now they'd had a taste of being on the other side. The next day, my older sister called. I knew this conversation was coming. So, about last night, she started, sounding hesitant. Was that really necessary? Bringing all those friends along just to make a point? I sighed, already expecting this reaction. Look, I said, I'm not trying to be difficult here. I just wanted you to understand how it feels. You've been asking me to split bills equally, even when it doesn't make sense, and I'm tired of it. I wanted to show you that it's not fair to expect someone to pay more than their share just because we're family. She was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking it over. I see where you're coming from, she finally admitted. But did you really need to go to such lengths? We could have just talked about it. We've tried talking about it, I pointed out, but every time I bring it up, I'm told to just go along with it because we're family. I needed you to see it from my perspective. Another pause, then she sighed. All right, fine, I get it. Maybe we haven't been fair to you, but next time, can we find a middle ground without all the theatrics? I couldn't help but smile a bit. Yeah, we can do that. I just want things to be fair, that's all. Okay, she said, sounding more at ease. We'll figure it out. But no more surprises like last night, okay? Deal, I replied, feeling a sense of relief. So here I am, in this awkward family situation, trying to figure out if I'm in the wrong for not wanting to split the bill equally when I don't have kids in the equation. It feels like no matter what I do, someone ends up upset, and I'm left wondering if I should have just sucked it up again to keep the peace. But at the same time, I don't want to be the one always compromising just to avoid conflict. Am I wrong for standing my ground and paying only for what I ordered? Or should I have just gone along with it, even if it didn't feel fair? Commentary time. This story really digs into the age-old family debate about fairness, finances, and the often unspoken expectations that come with family gatherings. OP, our narrator, has found himself in a tricky situation, repeatedly asked to foot a fair share of family bills that includes his sister's kids and spouses. What OP brings up here isn't just about money, it's about boundaries and respect. Values that can sometimes get blurred in families, especially when everyone assumes that family means sharing everything equally. From OP's perspective, it's easy to see why frustration has built up over time. Imagine covering extra costs year after year for nieces, nephews, and brothers-in-law, all while silently hoping for a little understanding. When he tried to talk it out before, his concerns were dismissed. So this time, he decided to make a bolder point, bringing friends along to share the experience. And his experiment worked. The tables were turned, and his sisters had to see just how uncomfortable it feels to cover more than what you actually ordered. But now, he's caught in a whirlwind of emotions, unsure if his actions were too extreme or if they were just the jolt needed to get everyone on the same page. What's fascinating is that this isn't just about the bill. It's about OP standing up for himself and asking his family to recognize his needs without downplaying them. It also highlights a challenge so many people face when balancing personal boundaries with family obligations. OP's story is a reminder that sometimes to get fair treatment, we have to push past our own comfort zone and stand up for what we feel is right, even if it means a bit of family drama. If you relate to OP's story and want to hear more tales of family dynamics, fairness, and finding your voice, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below. Do you think OP was justified, or did he go too far? And hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.